The Sky This Month with your host, Dave McDonald.
Welcome to The Sky This Month. I'm your host, Dave McDonald, and this is March 2025. And boy, do we have a show for you. March is full of neat stuff, including the Ides of March, and we're going to show you something to do with that. Well, the high point of the month is a total lunar eclipse is coming to America, and you can't stop it. It's going to happen, so you might as well watch it. And where can you watch it? What better place than from your own backyard? If you have a telescope, that's awesome. Binoculars in your backyard, great. But if you don't have binoculars or a telescope, you need to make your way to the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Now, if you happen to be out in California or Wyoming or Montana, where I know we have some stations broadcasting our show, well, it's a long trip. But perhaps you can find a neighbor, or maybe there's a planetarium science center near you that is going to be having an eclipse program with binoculars and telescopes handy. So if you're in New Hampshire, and you can make it to Concord, New Hampshire, you need to get there. The thing is, it's at midnight is when our program starts. Totality is around 1 o'clock a.m. for totality, but there's plenty to see between midnight and 1 o'clock. And we are going to have pizza for free, hot chocolate, soda for free. We're going to have a program indoors with presentations. We're going to have Pi Day activities, because this Friday, when the eclipse is happening, is Pi Day, March 14th. A little more on that to come. But don't miss this eclipse, and it's worth making the trip to see it through binoculars, to see it through telescopes at the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center. But that's early morning, Friday the 14th, midnight, like 12:01 a.m. to 3 a.m. Don't miss it. And we'll have Pi Day activities for all ages. Well, we'll get back to that again in a moment, because that definitely is a high point of the month. But also, what's going on this month? Several things. Mercury will be at its highest above the horizon. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because Mercury is elusive, and it is so satisfying when you get a chance to see the planet Mercury. Very few people, even astronomers, have seen Mercury with their own eyes. Then we're coming up to set the clocks ahead. It's spring forward for Eastern Daylight Time coming up. And perhaps your state has daylight savings time. Most do. There are a few funny pockets that don't. And then, of course, the lunar eclipse we'll talk about yet again. And Pi Day is happening March 14th, 3.14. And this month is the equinox, the vernal equinox. The spring equinox is happening this month, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that. And have you ever heard of the Messier Marathon? It's really not as messy as it seems. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if that's something that you're interested in, if you have some binoculars or a telescope, or some friends that may have a telescope, or maybe there's an astronomical society like the New Hampshire Astronomical Society that you can pair up with, this is a big event for the end of March. So Saturday, March 8th, Mercury is at its highest in the sky, and a little later in the program, when we talk about the night sky, I'll give you a glimpse of where Mercury will be in its relationship to Venus, which is blazing bright. So you don't want to miss this opportunity. And March 7th, 8th, 9th is fine. Even March 6th to March 10th is fine, but March 8th is kind of like the day when it's the highest. Because who knows, it may be cloudy on the 8th, but maybe clear on the 6th or the 10th. So those days will be just fine. And then don't forget to set your clocks ahead on Sunday morning, March 9th. And this is introducing to daylight savings time, and the sun is going to rise at 7:08 a.m., which is a little later, which means it's going to be a little darker, a little longer in the mornings, but as time goes on, that'll fix itself. But the sun is going to set at 6:47 p.m., and I personally love the afternoon sun. I love the longer afternoons to be able to get more things done before supper, or be able to go out and do some things after supper. So don't forget, March 9th, spring ahead with your clocks. And then coming up on March 14th, early morning, like 12:01 a.m., is the total lunar eclipse. We've already talked about that, and I'm going to mention it again at the end of the program because you don't want to miss this event. It's happening all over America, so no matter what state you're in watching this program, you can enjoy the total lunar eclipse. And I'd advise you to get to a place or with somebody that has at least binoculars, if not a telescope. This is the area. You can see that pinkish area right in the middle. This is the area that it will be showing totality. And you can see all of the continental United States, Mexico, Canada is all involved. The western part of Alaska, sorry, not so much for you. But anyway, we're good here in the lower 48. So what causes a lunar eclipse anyway? This is a slide I shared last month. So obviously on the left is the sun, and then we have Earth in the middle, and the moon is over on the right side. So as the moon moves, let's say down here at the bottom right, the moon is moving as it orbits Earth, and it's going to move into what we call the penumbra, and that's a light shadow where there's a little bit of the sunlight blocked out, as you can see by the geometry here. And for most people, that's difficult to detect when that happens. You almost need a light meter to be able to tell that's happening. But then as the moon goes around Earth, it's going to enter the darker shadow area, which is called the umbra. And as it enters the umbra, it will start to show more coverage. It'll get darker and darker. It's not going to go like to dark because, as you've seen with the image behind me, which you can see, it has that blood red. Sometimes it's referred to as a blood red moon. And the reason why, and maybe we can pop the image behind me into the front. And the reason why you have this color is the sun is going through the atmosphere of Earth, and what you're seeing reflected off of the moon are all the sunrises and all the sunsets all around Earth being reflected off the moon. So you have that pinkish, orangish, reddish glow of all the sunrises and sunsets, and that's what causes this pretty neat color. So then you have the moon is in the umbra, the total shadow, and then it exits the umbral phase, and you can detect it now is lightening up, and once again it goes back to just a very little shade of darkness, and eventually obviously it exits the penumbra and is normally bright. So that's the basics of how a lunar eclipse works. You have the sun, Earth in the middle, and the moon enters the shadow of Earth. So pretty cool. And again, don't miss it. As mentioned, that same Friday, March 14th, is Pi Day. March 14th, 3.14, right? You get it? 3.14. And you can have all kinds of activities. You could have contests. Who can memorize the most digits of pi? What trivia items can you look up and know about pi? Was pi always called pi? When did it start being pi? There was one point at which it's the number by which you would multiply the square of the radius in order to get the area of a circle. It was a very long, not really a word, but a phrase. And then at some point in time, I'll leave it to you to look it up. But there will be so many activities, so many pieces of trivia that you never even dreamed about pi, that we're going to have at the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center. And did you know that you can actually calculate pi without using a circle? And we're going to show you at the Discovery Center how you can calculate the value of pi, no circles involved. It's really kind of cool. And we are welcoming the New Hampshire Astronomical Society to help us celebrate the eclipse in Pi Day. They will have telescopes there, all different kinds. So if you're also just looking to what should I buy for a telescope, come on down, and there'll be a variety of telescopes to look through, as well as some binoculars. And this is for all ages. Now, I know this is like a school morning, that when this event is over, kids need to go off to school. But it is so worth it. It's 1 out of 180, whatever the number is for your state, 1 out of 180 days of school. And it's okay to go to school a little bit groggy. It's worth it. So all ages, elementary, middle school, high school, college, adults, families, come on down to the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center and enjoy. The event is free, the pizza is free, the hot chocolate, the drinks are free. And we are sponsored, as you can see, at the bottom, Domino's Pizza, Sal's Pizza, Constantly Pizza, Coca-Cola of the Northeast. And we just want you to come and enjoy yourself. And it's going to be such a worthwhile event. Now, the equinox is the vernal equinox. And the vernal equinox is happening on March 20th at 4:01 a.m. And now we are in Eastern Daylight Time, the EDT, or whatever the daylight time is for your time zone. And one of the big things, like typically we have the Stonehenge picture, but the orientation of Stonehenge is primarily for the solstices, though there is acquisition relative to the equinox and the sun as well. But here we have Chichen Itza in Mexico and Quetzalcoatl. You look at down in the lower left, you can see the heads of these like dragon-like snake here at the sides of these steps coming down. And you can see the imagery here on this very, very huge pyramid. A close-up of the dragon that's coming down, the snake dragon that's coming down. You can see that on the equinox, and it happens September and March, equinoxes, the vernal and autumnal equinox. Look over here and you can see how the shadow makes it look like the serpent, the snake, this dragon snake is coming down. And there's the head that I showed you earlier. So you don't want to miss enjoying the equinox on March 20th. It happens at 4:01 a.m. and that's when the sun crosses the equator. So in the image up in the upper left here, the sun is over here on the right. This is the sun's rays, and I just cut off the word there. And so coming directly from the sun will be directly over the equator on the equinox. And one thing that I would encourage you to do is, because this is a good timing for this day, is on March 20th, get some eggs out, and you, your family, your friends, see if you can balance an egg on its end, on the wider end to start with. But I had a student at school, after he and several others balanced the egg on its wider end, say, "Can I balance an egg on its narrow end?" And I said, "I've never seen it done, but have at it." His name was Kyle, probably still is. And he lay down on the floor at school, and he just took his time and with great patience and dexterity just moved and manipulated that egg on its narrow end. And then he's like, "Mr. McDonald, I got it." Sure enough, he did, and I took a picture. So you take a picture, send it to me. My email is astromannh@gmail.com, astromannh@gmail.com. Send me your pictures, and maybe I can feature them on next month's show of you balancing an egg on its end. Bonus points if you balance it on the narrow end. So something to do that will be fun on March 20th. Then you see the pictures on the lower left. The June solstice, you can see the angle of the shadow, and as the sun hits, you can see that it's not a straight line like it is on the September equinox. You kind of have more of the up and down straight line of where the sun is hitting Earth, and on the December solstice is hitting the southern hemisphere more and less on the northern hemisphere, whereas in the June solstice, the northern hemisphere is getting the more direct sunlight, and down in the Antarctic is in darkness, and in the December solstice, the Arctic area is in darkness. And then back to the March equinox, which is what we have this month, is we have that straight shadow line, so that everywhere on Earth gets some light and gets some darkness. So hope that you enjoy that on the day of March 20th. Earth goes around the sun, and the angle of the axis of Earth is 23.5 degrees, and it always points in the same direction. It always points, the axis points towards the North Star. The North Star is like 3/4 of a degree off of dead center, but pretty close. So as Earth goes around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, it goes around almost a degree every day, right? 360 degrees in a circle, 365.25 days in a year. So almost a degree every day. And as the sun comes around from an equinox where the direct rays are happening here, we have the sun, Earth coming around, and we have the midnight sun here in the northern hemisphere. You can see that the northern axis of Earth is pointing towards the sun. So we have sunlight all around the Arctic region and more direct rays. So we have warmth in the summertime, and this is what happens in June. And then we come around to September, and though the axis stays in the same pointing direction, the direct rays of the sun are evenly going to light up Earth as September goes on, right around the 21st. And then over to winter, and then you can see the northern rotational axis of Earth is pointing away from the sun. The southern axis is pointing towards the sun. So the southern hemisphere has its summer, the northern hemisphere has its winter. So that's just a little bit behind what goes on. Hey, how about a Messier marathon? Do you even know what a Messier marathon is? Do you have binoculars or a small telescope, or do you know somebody who does? How about the New Hampshire Astronomical Society? They do. Go to their website at nhastro.com, nhastro.com, HTTP, don't use the S. And then we're going to check out what the Messier Marathon looks like, meet a little bit, learn a little bit about Charles Messier, who invented it, and then I'm going to show you just some pictures that are available to you to see from New Hampshire. So let's have a look at what a Messier Marathon is all about.
The madness of March has begun. Who will rise through the ranks and come out victorious? I'm referring, of course, to the exciting, nail-biting challenge of amateur astronomy. Skywatching enthusiasts across the Northern Hemisphere are prepping their telescopes for this year's Messier Marathon, where they try to find as many of the 110 Messier objects as they can in just one night. To celebrate, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope is releasing 12 new images of Messier objects. Charles Messier was a French astronomer in the 1700s and early 1800s. He was interested in discovering comets, but it took time to determine which fuzzy features in the sky were new moving objects and which were permanent and stationary. So Messier compiled a list of the permanent features to make it easier to identify the new comets. This list, now known as the Messier Catalog, includes star clusters, nebulas, and galaxies, and it's popular with amateur astronomers because they're all relatively bright and findable with a backyard telescope. There are a few weeks from mid-March to early April when it's possible for people in the Northern Hemisphere to observe all 110 Messier objects in one night. This is best done close to the time of a new moon, which in 2018 is March 17th. Many astronomy clubs across the globe organize Messier marathons around this time, and only people with the most skill, endurance, willpower, good luck, and darkest skies manage to find all 110 objects before the sun rises. The Hubble Space Telescope has plenty of skill and the darkest sky possible, but it doesn't have the agility to point toward 110 objects in different parts of the sky within 12 hours. Over the years, though, Hubble has provided fantastic zoomed-in images of most of the Messier catalog. These 12 new images were recently processed from existing Hubble data and compiled into Hubble's gallery of Messier objects to share the excitement of stargazing and to let amateur astronomers compare their views to those of Hubble. The 12 new images include 6 spiral galaxies, 4 elliptical galaxies, and 2 globular clusters. M58 was one of the first galaxies recognized to have a spiral shape, and it's the most distant Messier object. M90 is one of the few galaxies to be moving toward our own Milky Way galaxy rather than away. Though Messier himself may have been disappointed that these objects weren't comets, each of them has a unique story to tell. Whether you use a space observatory like Hubble, a small telescope on the ground, binoculars, or just your own eyes, there are always interesting things to look at in the night sky.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that video about what a Messier marathon is and a little bit about Messiers. You may have noticed the date 2018 was mentioned, and that video was prepared by NASA, thank you NASA, for the 2018 Messier marathon season, but that really is irrelevant because the Messier marathon is in season every year, the end of March, the beginning of April. We're looking for the time at the last week of March, the beginning of April, when it's kind of new moon season, because you want as little of the moon lighting up the sky as possible. But that's the time of the year when these 110 objects, of which there are really only 109, because one of them is a duplicate. So there's really only 109. But if you find all 110, you know you've got them all. So this is M1 in Taurus, and this is available now. It's in our winter sky. Taurus is, if you follow the diagonal of Orion's belt up to the right, you're going to bump into Taurus. Jupiter is hanging out there, as is Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, and the Crab Nebula, which is what this is there. The Crab Nebula was seen in broad daylight in like the year 1044 when the Chinese noticed it in broad daylight. There was a star, and that happened to be the explosion of this star, which the remnants are now called the Crab Nebula, and there's a white dwarf star. You can't see it quite in this image, but right in the middle there's a white dwarf star, which is the remnant star of that explosion. M13 in Hercules is a great globular cluster and very easy to find and looks great in binoculars. M44 in Cancer, I'm going to show you this as soon as I finish going through these. When we talk about the night sky, I'm going to show you specifically where to find M44. It's the Beehive cluster, the Praesepe. It's in the constellation of Cancer. And here's a close-up of it. It's just a beautiful star cluster in the constellation of Cancer. I'm going to show you where you can find that. The M42, that's Messier object 42 in the constellation of Orion, known as, oddly enough, the Orion Nebula. Beautiful color there. However, I must warn you, when you look at it through your backyard telescope, you're probably not going to see the color because there's not enough light, there's not enough photon energy that is going to activate the cones that are at the fovea of your eye. So the rods will be activated, so mostly you're going to see kind of a black and white, maybe a greenish kind of a tinge of the image. But you can go to your garage and get out your Hubble Space Telescope and enjoy the color. And this was taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. But you can see it hanging from Orion's belt. You can notice it's there. Binoculars will be a help, and a small telescope is even more helpful. And then M101 in Ursa Major, which is near the Big Dipper, and this is a great pinwheel galaxy, and it's nicknamed the Pinwheel Galaxy. And what a great sight this is through a telescope. And then my favorite, just about everybody's favorite, it's always a request at the Planetarium Theater. Can you show us the Andromeda Galaxy, M31? Yes. And M31 is the closest major galaxy to us, a mere 2.5 million light years away. And then you can see down here, this is actually M32, another Messier object, which is a satellite galaxy of M31. And this is just an amazing image, and you can see this. This is the farthest object you can see with the unaided eye in the sky. And we've talked about that at other times on other shows. So don't miss the Messier Marathon. It's a great opportunity to get out and be challenged to find as many as you can. There's the micro marathon, the mini marathon, and there's the full-fledged Messier Marathon. But as a beginner, it's just fun to go out and see just how many you can find on whatever night you choose, where obviously it's clear and moonless, the end of March, the very beginning of April. And pretty much this year, 2025, we're looking to the last week of March. So I hope that you have an opportunity to do that. Hey, let me show you where you can find Mercury and some other things that are visible in the night sky. Well, I hope you enjoy that information. There's a whole bunch of things happening in the month of March. And so what I thought I would show you, as promised, is where you can find Mercury, because this is a great season to be able to find Mercury, which is very elusive, and not many people ever get to see it, because it's always in a lit background sky, and it's always pretty close to the horizon. So on March 8th, and we're facing west, of course, where the sun has set, this is around 6:30 on March 8th, and you can see right down here the planet Venus. You can't miss. Venus is blazing bright. And to the lower left of Venus is, ta-da, the planet Mercury. Binoculars will be a help, but it should be bright enough. And if you have a really low western horizon, without, like that you can see it's about to set behind a tree, the better, because the darker the background sky, the better to be able to find Mercury. But again, binoculars will be a help, but it's nice to have a guide. Venus shining so brightly, and to the lower left of Venus, around 6:30, Mercury, you can see, is about half the distance to the horizon. So I hope you get a chance to get out March 8th. And again, March 6th, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all good days. And if you have a really low western horizon, you may be able to find it before the 6th or after the 10th. But March 8th is kind of the target primo night. Then I want to show you some stars. And these stars are, I'm going to start with Orion. You can see Orion the Hunter here, very famous from Orion's belt. And Betelgeuse is red. The upper left stars, we look at Orion, Betelgeuse is red. And if you go diagonally through Orion, you're going to come up to the twin stars, Castor and Pollux. Pollux is labeled here. And then you have Castor, which doesn't have a label. But Mars is right there. And you have the twin stars, Castor, Pollux, and Mars almost making pretty much a 90-degree angle. And of those three objects, Mars will be the brightest, and it definitely has a reddish hue to it, so you can't miss it. And then brighter still is the planet Jupiter, and Jupiter is above Orion, and this is the star that has to do with the Taurus, the bull, eye. But Jupiter is the brightest object in the night sky, unless the moon is out, and Venus will have set at this time, which is around 9 p.m. in the western sky. So Jupiter, you can't miss it. Get out your small telescope and enjoy the moons of Jupiter. And also you have the first Friday night of every month at the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center. The first Friday of every month at 7 o'clock, we have the New Hampshire Astronomical Society there, and they will help you with telescopes. Whether it's cloudy or not, somebody will be there to help you with your telescope questions and answer questions. If it's clear, bonus, we'll have more New Hampshire Astronomical Society people there with telescopes to look at things, and you really do want to catch the Galilean moons of Jupiter. You want to see Mars. And the Precipice M44 that I mentioned to you is hanging out right around here. If we can go to the next slide and see, it's called the Beehive Cluster. It's kind of its nickname, and it's in the constellation of Cancer. And then you can look through binoculars and see that image that I showed you before, M44. And then over again to the left, as you look at the sky, Regulus, the heart of the lion. So just to kind of put it together with the imagery of the artwork, let's look at the next slide, and you can see all the different constellations that are involved, from Taurus to Orion, and over here we have Cancer the Crab, and pretty much in the middle, that's where you're going to find M44. You have the twins, the Castor and Pollux representing their heads. Procyon is the little dog star. So many things to see, and I hope that was helpful for you. But we want to close with the last commercial about this awesome, awesome event. This event is going to be early morning, March 14th. That's Friday morning from midnight to 3 a.m. at the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center. Telescopes with the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, presentations about eclipses, free pizza, hot chocolate, and the whole event is free. Everything's included, indoor restrooms, tables to enjoy the Pi Day activities for all ages. So much to do during March, and I hope to see you in person at the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center. I plan to be there myself in person. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show, you learned some things, and you'll get out and look at the night sky, and remember to keep looking up.